Well, before we get started on our team, I'd like to address the recent tragic events in our country. I share the anger and frustration that we have witnessed across the country. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family and friends of George Floyd and others who have seen a similar fate. The police brutality and misconduct that occurred in Minneapolis, what has happened in other places in our country, including right here in South Carolina, is unacceptable and needs to stop. Enough is enough. It is sad that in 2020 we're having these conversations. I was very fortunate. My dad was a history teacher, and if we weren't playing sports or watching sports, we were talking about history, and one of his favorite topics was the 1960 Civil Rights Movement. These recent tragic events that have occurred have brought a lot of memories back to me and my dad talking about Dr. King. He admired Dr. King and always talked on how we can learn from our history to help us with our future. So last week, I asked Levy Johnson, who's a friend of mine here in Columbia, to talk with our football team, his son Chris, who's a chaplain for Coach Martin in the basketball, and also Charles Jackson Jr., who runs our spiritual development program. Mr. Johnson was part of the civil rights movements in the 60s. The first thing he talked to our players about was having the right to vote, and that gives you a voice. And we did this as a team on Friday. We went down and registered. Most of our guys registered to vote. A lot did it online, but very proud of them to understanding that part of it and hearing that message, which that was the one most important thing he talked about. He also talked about educating yourself from your past. He was the first African-American graduate from the University of South Carolina Law School, the first African-American to be president of the Bar Association here in the state of South Carolina. So he has overcome racism in his life in a first-class manner. He's one of the pillars of our community and how he leads his life, and I thought was really talked in terms of the things that he went through, the adversity that he faced coming up in a very tough time in the 60s. Also, Reverend Charles Jackson Sr., who's been 49 years at Brooklyn Baptist Church, talked to our team as well. He emphasized communicating, a peaceful protest, which we did this Friday as a football team at the governor's mansion at the State House, but continuing to build relationships that break down the barriers that we have in our country. But I think the two words that, as a team, that we took from this was educating and communicating. The more you know about somebody, the more you feel comfortable with them, and that's what we've got to continue to do. The two unacceptable words at this time as a team that we talked about was silence and violence. Actions are louder than words. I can put out a paragraph on social media. That does nothing compared to what we did Friday as a football team. But the actions are what we need. We can't be silent about racial inequality at this time. Violence, Dr. King once said, hate begets hate, violence begets violence, and that's still true today. That's not the answer for what we need to do as we continue to move forward. But we're going to continue to educate and communicate our team. I have speakers scheduled throughout the month of June. My father always told me it's easy to do what is right. That means a lot to me. That says a lot about when you're in a time of adversity, when you're in a time of strife, to be able to do what is right, and that's important to me. I'd love to one day see our world as a locker room. Doesn't mean we all love each other. That's not true. Doesn't mean we all like each other, but we have respect for each other, and we have respect for the common purpose that we're all coming together for. So those are just my thoughts on some recent events in our country. Right now with our football team, all of June is just for our strength and conditioning staff. The only time we can meet with our players are on virtual and the Zoom calls, continuing to work through our installation, continuing to work through some topics with our football team. There is not a July calendar yet set by the NCAA of when we're going to be able to meet with our players, so I don't know when that's going to happen. Obviously, we're working with a couple different models and preparing for those things, but don't know when that's going to happen. Our team right now has 4 lift groups, one at 8 in the morning, one at 9:30, one at 1, and one at 2:30. We're entering the building in clusters of 4 to 5 guys. They're having a temperature taken. They're checking their symptoms. They're walking from one end of the building where they normally enter on one side and walking straight to the weight room to get their run and their workout in. They're leaving the building on the other side. After each group leaves, we sanitize the entire building of where any of those guys could have had contact with. We're not showering in the building. They have two things of clothes that they're able to work out in. We sanitize everything for the next day, and they've got another set that they wear for the next day. We had COVID-19 testing and antibody testing and physicals last week. I'm not going to address any positives that we could or couldn't have, or if we had any. If we did have a positive, we have protocols in place for them to be quarantined, and we've got a good plan set for that. I want to thank Clint Haggard and George Wynn and the job they did preparing and researching the things that we need to do within our organization to make it the safest possible environment for our student athletes. All signees are here except for Zaquandre White. I think he will be here by mid-July. Should clear everything up. Injury report-wise, if we start camp on time, which I'm planning on that, the only two guys that will not be full speed will be Chad Terrell, who tore his ACL in spring practice. We think he'll be ready 1st of September. And Rosendo Lewis had surgery on his quad, which we think he'll be ready 1st of September. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Hey, well, it's Dave. Well, thanks for doing this, first of all. And second, if you guys have had a positive test, what are the protocol procedures? Are those guys locked down for 2 weeks?
Yep, 14 days at this time is what the quarantine is. We've gone, Clint and them have gone back and forth from 14 to 10 days, but right now it's at 14 days, and obviously their cluster is also going to be tested and shut down as well for 14 days.
Hey, Will, it's Phil Kornblue. Thanks for giving us some time. Last week we saw around the country several current former black football players making accusations towards some of their coaches. Do you think moving forward there'll be a different relationship on football teams, on athletic teams in college between the white coaches and black players, just in terms of being especially careful about what you say, how you say? Are things going to change? Is that relationship going to change?
Phil, I can just speak for me personally, and I don't think anything's going to change. I think, as you go through life in your profession and what you do, you constantly, at least I do, self-evaluate the things you can do better, and I can be a better listener. And that's what I've told our football team and some of the conversations that we've had moving forward. But as far as the relationships that I have with any player, it's not going to change for me, no.
Coach Joe Gorcha, WIS, and also thanks for doing this. 2 quick questions. One, you guys plan to test again relatively soon because you participated in the public protest, and then secondly, why was it so important to you to be visible with your players at the protest on Friday?
Well, at this time, and we probably did violate some social distancing there during the protest, but we felt like we were doing the right thing, and that's why we did it. We're testing the temperature and the symptoms every single day, and then unless any of those change, then we don't plan on testing at this time. We have tested every player. We have tested every staff member, and anybody that enters the Ken and Cindy Long facility has been tested and cleared before they're allowed to come back here. I felt it was important for our football team to make a statement, and I told our team that Carol and I were going to be there on Friday. They're more than welcome to walk if they wanted to, and our entire team, other than some guys that had graduation that were not able to come to the march, but our entire team took part.
Hey, well, this is Colin. I know you mentioned registering to vote, and I know some schools have been doing off days on November 3rd. Do you plan on doing something similar to that to kind of encourage guys to get out and vote after registering this past week?
Well, again, we're going to certainly encourage them to vote, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but they'll have plenty of time to go vote. I can assure you of that.
Hey, Will, this is Coach Watchbot. Appreciate you for doing this. Jay Urich posted kind of went viral. Even Dr. Bernice King, she posted it. How important is it to have a teammate like Jay and a player like Jay in the locker room?
Well, the fortunate thing here at South Carolina, we've got a lot of guys like Jay that care about each other, that see the injustice that's going on in our country and want to stand up for each other. And, when you want to stand up for your teammate, it's a brotherhood. And I'm proud of Jay, but I'm also proud of our entire team.
Hey, Coach, it's Chantel with Sports Illustrated. I know a couple of teams around the country have released numbers just in terms of testing positive, including Alabama and it's been a handful of players. I know you guys have protocol in place, but is there any concern, about, some of your opponents and how they might be handling things and how that would affect y'all?
I'm just worried about South Carolina and our football team. That's all I can control.
Hey, Coach, Mike Gillespie from ABC Columbia. Just wondering if you could compare this to anything that you have been through before in terms of COVID having this kind of an effect on college football. Have you or any of your staff ever gone through anything like this before? Something that's really challenged you guys with this?
Nothing even close, Mike. I mean, just as far as the amount of time that we've been off. I wouldn't say off. We've been working, but working from home, the virtual. I'm about zoomed out. I'll be honest with you. But no, we've not been through anything like this before.
Will, Steve again. Go ahead, Josh.
As it pertains to Friday's march, if one of those players tested positive, would you need to quarantine everybody who was there under that protocol?
No, I think that it's mostly the people that they've come into close contact with. That's why we're trying to limit it to the clusters. And obviously, we risked a little of the social distancing part of that through the march, and that's something I'll let our medical staff handle.
Will, Dave again. For the guys that have come back and just kind of done some of the light workouts that you know of, just how well were they able to stay in semi-decent shape through this shutdown?
Well, Dave, I'm going to go back to what I said a while back. This is the first day back for them lifting and running. So I'll know more after today when I talk to Coach Jackson and his staff about how things went. But I would say there's a percentage that probably did more than they're supposed to. There's probably a pretty good percentage that did exactly what they're supposed to. Probably a percentage that didn't do quite enough, and probably a small percentage that didn't do anything. So we'll find out more after today and know more after today about the condition of the team.
Hey, Will, this is Ben from the state. You mentioned kind of not knowing what July is going to look like. How much of a challenge is having sort of that unknown as the season does start to kind of climb closer?
Well, Ben, you're planning for everything, and there's different models out there that the Football Oversight Committee is going through right now. And Commissioner Sankey and William King have done a great job of keeping the coaches involved in those conversations. Every Thursday we have a meeting and we talk through, the different models that they're looking at. So we've got plan A, B, C, and D right now on the table for me to be able to plan to, when we are able to engage with our players in a one-on-one or position or a team setting again. And whenever we're able to do that, we'll have a good plan set in place.
Will, this is Josh again. Are the player-run practices that they would normally be having during the summer allowed under the current structure?
No, they're not right now. I mean, we're still working through that through the league office. Matter of fact, we had a call in this morning to clarify exactly what our players can do with the football.
What was the determination? What can they do with the football?
I hadn't heard back yet.
Oh, okay.
With Colin again, I guess.
Columbia again. Just wondering how long this plan took to get to be put in place. I know you mentioned a couple guys were working on this, but were you a part of any of these conversations in terms of temperature checks, how often these guys are going to get checked, et cetera?
No, I mean I was involved in the conversations, but believe me, I'm a football coach, not a doctor. So these guys, we call the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer. Obviously, we talked a lot to our counterparts in the Southeastern Conference to formulate a plan on how we needed to safest way to bring our student athletes back on campus. And again, they wouldn't be back if we didn't think it was safe. So let's make sure we understand that. But Clint and George Wynn worked extremely hard to come up with the plan that we have in place, the protocols we have in place for our players, and I've been very complimentary of our players this past week and how they've handled themselves, because it is a little different. You know, we've tried to eliminate some of the unknowns out there and eliminating contact with that. I contradict myself, but I felt like the march was important for us to do that. So, you know, that's what we're trying to limit as much as possible.
Hey, Will, it's Phil Kornblut again. With all the recruiting wiped out, the in-person recruiting wiped out, the spring evaluations wiped out, and having to go strictly virtual and through phone and social media and all, how do you feel your recruiting is coming along? Do you feel like you're still kind of where you expected to be, hope to be at this point, now going to the summer?
You know, Phil, it's an interesting stat last week. There was over 750 players committed to Division I schools, okay? This time last year, there was 300. So a lot of those commitments out there are what I call reservations. And that's just the facts of where we are, because there's a lot of schools saying, hey, you may not have a spot, go ahead and just take a spot right now. And that's happening. That's unfortunate that that's happening. I had a conversation with a young man and his parents last night, and they had two different coaches tell them, you better commit now or you're not going to have a spot. So that's unfortunate. We're not doing it that way. I think that a strength of our staff is, number one, the relationships that we build, and we've been hurt by that because we haven't had them on campus. I think another huge advantage for us is Columbia, is our facility, the Kendon Cindy Long facility, is the Dodie Anderson, is Williams-Brice Stadium, and we unfortunately not been able to get on. We didn't have the type of year that we wanted to have last year. So I think all of those things combined have slowed us down a little bit on where we would want to be right now. But signing date's not till December, and the second signing date's in February. So there's a lot of time to be made up in those situations. And I personally see a lot of the commitments right now are reservations. That's all those things are, on first-hand knowledge of talking to recruits and parents about how some people handle the recruiting process. That's not how we're going to do it, but, you know, that's fine.
Will, Dave again. With Chad Terrell specifically, did he tear the same ACL that he did a couple of years ago?
No, it was a non-contact, and it was his other knee.
Hey, Will, this is Colin again. I guess in conversations with Coach Bobo just about the install, how has that gone for guys, and how do you think they're kind of grasping things, even though they're having to learn a lot of it via Zoom or something like that?
Well, fortunately, Colin, we got in 5 practices, and that's more than a lot of people did. So that does give you a little, I'm not saying comfort level, but it does at least ease your mind a little bit. Now, I know from Mike's standpoint, to be able to get on the field with the guys, to have a better feel for what they can handle, what they can do, and what can we do best. Now, that's still going to be determined over a period of time. But, you know, at the end of the day, you can only do so much in a Zoom meeting setting. You need to be able to walk through, and you need to be able to practice. You need to be able to coach off of the film, off the guys on the field. And that's the bottom line. And so you can only do so much through meetings. I think the guys have worked hard, and they've done a nice job with the meetings, and the coach has done a good job. But there's only so much you can get done.
Will, again,
go ahead.
How early were the incoming freshmen allowed to kind of get involved in those Zoom meetings, and did that perhaps give them a little bit of a chance of a leg up to kind of get their feet wet a little bit before coming to campus? It
was only a couple of weeks. They had to officially graduate from high school, and then they could attend the Zoom meetings and all those different. When I say officially, not necessarily mean walk. I mean they've completed their classes. So once they completed their classes, they were able to take part of the Zoom meetings, which was most of our guys were able to a week and a half up to 2 weeks of Zoom meetings. So it was a little advantage, but not much.
Will, you mentioned all the protocols that you have expressed to the team about, you know, kind of how to handle themselves in the building. How are you guys handling what they do when they're not in the building, you know, with their dorms or going out to the grocery store or that? Or are there some places off limits, or how are you guys approaching that?
Well, I told our football team, David, the teams that are going to win this fall are going to be the mature football teams, the teams that make really good decisions when they're not in the building, because they have a lot of time on their hands. We do have some guys enrolled in classes that are working towards graduation, but most of our guys are not enrolled in classes right now. I didn't want the freshmen to be enrolled in classes because of being in, you know, their first college classes being online, which I didn't know that was going to be the best situation for them. and the NCAA passed a waiver to be able to be enrolled as a student athlete without taking a class, which that was a really good move on their part. So, they've got some time on their hands, and I told them you got to be very mature about your time and how you spend your time, and be very smart and mindful of where you are and who is around you, and making sure that you have some knowns around you as opposed to the unknown.
But you didn't make anything specifically off limits in terms of you can't go here or you're out for 2 weeks or whatever.
Well, I told our guys to be smart.
Hey, Will, based on what you're hearing from Coach Tanner and others, maybe in the medical field and maybe the models you have looked at today, how confident are you that you'll have a full football season beginning on time?
I'm very confident. I think that in my role, that's what you got to plan for, Phil. You got to plan the fact that at some point we're going to get our players back in July and be able to work with our players in July. We're going to start training camp and report on August 6th, and we're going to play on September 5th against Coastal Carolina here at Williams-Brice Stadium. That's what I'm planning on. That's what my confidence level is very high for that.
Coach, you mentioned this earlier in the call about finding out whether or not when players can kind of resume using the football, how they interact in player practices. How significant do you think it would be the sooner the better for guys to get a football back in their hands and do at least player drills together? Because the longer you wait, it would seem that would be tough to build that chemistry with the ball in your hand.
Well, there's no question. Sooner than later. I've been coaching now over 20 years, and we've had player-run practices for 20 years, and you're able to do them in your facility with your training staff there. The coaches can't be there. The strength staff can't be there, but that's a huge building point for your football team in the off season. And I understand that our guys have been off, and I understand the concerns about them moving back too quickly with this or the situations with the virus. So I get and I understand those, but more than likely our guys are going to find somewhere to go throw, and I'd rather them do it here at our facility.
Will, throughout the last couple months with COVID and then now all the stuff with the protests and things like that, who are some of the guys that you've seen really step up and kind of develop into a leader and kind of help organize things from that perspective to keep guys kind of on track and focused?
It's interesting, Colin. We had a team meeting last week, and the guys really opened up, and we started the meeting at 10 in the morning, and the meeting finished at about 12:35. It's a 2.5 hour Zoom meeting with your football team. And as we hung up, and I'm not going to get into specifics of who or what, but Mike Bobo called me up and he goes, you know what? He goes, you got some guys that are well thought out, that think about issues, that think about problems. He goes, there were some really, intelligent, bright comments that were brought up on this football team, and some very strong individuals with some strong personalities. So here's a guy that's, Coach Bobo's been here since December, and we broke up in March when we broke for spring break. So he basically said January and February being a part of our team around our players for 2 months, and to hear that from him said a lot. But I wouldn't want to single anybody out, Colin. I thought that that call was very revealing. We got some strong personalities and some good leadership.
Will, you guys obviously didn't get to have your annual coaches clinic in the spring, but you guys did that digital version. How did you feel that kind of went, and do you feel like that was a pretty productive thing?
Yeah, I think it was very productive. just an opportunity to talk ball. That's what we're all starving for, to make some connection with some other coaches out there. At times there was, 200-300 coaches on a Zoom call, talking Gamecock football. So that's exciting to be able to connect with those guys, and the guys that, we really miss as assistant coaches. I can't as a head coach, but to get on the road in the spring is something that our guys enjoy doing. The relationships they've built with the high school coaches here in the state and our surrounding area. But I thought it went extremely well.
Hey, Coach, it's Hale. I was just curious, how will not having the camps this summer, when you guys are able to have prospects come in and work them out and see them in person and all that, how much will that affect you guys and how you're evaluating guys for, I guess, not only this 2021 class, but some of the classes moving forward?
Well, again, I think that you've got to really rely on the high school coaches as far as, referring to a player's character, the type of person he is, the kind of work ethic he has. That's not something you're going to be able to see firsthand. You got to rely on the film. You got to rely on what you see on film, level of competition. I mean, all those things you've got to go through, the critical factors that we think are really important. I mean, you're not going to see those firsthand unless we're able to evaluate in the fall. So you've got to really rely on those things, and more than anything, the high school coaches to be able to help you as far as, hey, this guy's a great worker. He's extremely bright. He's got good football intelligence. I mean, those are the things that sometimes in a camp setting you're able to answer for yourself. And then the high school coach can always help you by saying, yeah, that's good. Or, you know what, coach, you may want to relook at that. So you've got to rely on those people in those situations.
And as far as when y'all are able to have recruits back onto campus, what are those conversations like? Or is it more of an NCAA thing or a league thing? And do you have any idea of where all that stuff sort of stands right now?
Well, right now, the first time we would be able to have anybody on campus would be September 1st, and that's what's set by the NCAA calendar. But that's an NCAA issue, and that's going to probably be detailed about how the virus goes as we continue to move forward. So I think the virus is going to determine that for the NCAA to make a decision.
So how's Mo Kaba doing with his ACL rehab, and kind of when do you expect him back full tilt?
He is doing extremely well. Been very pleased from Clint Haggard and what he has told me with Mo. Just a guy that's moved around well. Probably mid-July is when they're going to clear him based on what Clint told me last time. But he feels really good about his movement skills. He is working out full, as far as the weight room is concerned, full speed. And then we've modified his running program, but they think he'll be fully cleared by 1st to middle of July. Yep.
Hey, Will, when you have a team come together like yours did last week with the march, and as you say, inside your locker room, everybody seems to be really together of one and pulling in the same direction. As you go through your work this summer and prepare for the season, how do you feel that kind of coming together can translate into the type of team and performance you might have this fall?
Well, I don't think there's any question through times of adversity you find out a lot about people. And I saw a team galvanize itself through some meetings last week and then obviously on Friday. But that was nothing that surprised me or shocked me. I've been pleased with how we've worked through the off-season program. And I've been pleased in how we've come together through a adverse situation to try and make a difference in our city and in our state and in our country.